Hi, I'm Kira Gallagher.
Hi, I'm Natalie B. Faraman.
And hi, I'm Emily Beth.
And this is our final Capstone project on medical cannabis in North Carolina.
Okay, so the problem with no cannabis legalization in North Carolina is that we're not tapping into all the resources that we could. Instead of focusing so much energy on creating new meds, we could utilize what we already have. So it's still illegal in most of the U.S. However, it is legal for medical use in 36 states. So this is why we focused for our grant engineering challenge instead of actively changing or creating a new medicine, utilizing what we already have. And then our local connection is North Carolina residents with debilitating conditions.
So when we were addressing our problem, we chose to write a letter to legislation, the House, the Assembly, and we addressed the NC Compassionate Care Act, which is a bill that works to provide caregivers and patients with qualified conditions with medical cannabis. It also works to make sure it's regulating the distribution and production of medical cannabis products in the state. And yeah.
Okay, so for our preliminary research, we wanted to learn more about what cannabis is exactly and how it can help. So cannabis is actually a plant and it contains cannabinoids. Some of these cannabinoids are THC and CBD. THC is what gives you the high from cannabis, and CBD is what's more used for medical purposes. And as Emily said before, 36 states have legalized some form of cannabis, whether that be medical or recreational.
And then next we have the uses for cannabis in medicine, which are epilepsy, nausea, loss of appetite and weight loss, chronic pain, sleep problems, neuropathic pain, reduced inflammation, and MS symptoms. These are just a couple. There are a bunch of others, but we just wanted to kind of give you a say of like what we have. So, and then we can also have medical cannabis in the form of ointments, lotions, edibles, extracts, tinctures, and it can also be smoked or vaporized.
Okay, so this part of our project, we went ahead and interviewed with a bunch of experts to just learn more about their research opinions. So our first up, we have Lauren Dutra, who is in California. She's a social epidemiologist, and her main focus of research is tobacco and cannabis. So she brought up a good point with how recreational legalization decreases incarceration rates, as well as decreases racial profiling, which is something we hadn't necessarily thought of in the beginning of this project. So we also learned about the less addictive properties of cannabis and how this could be used as an alternative to opiates during this opiate epidemic.
So our next mentor was Dr. Thurstone, and he was a psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist and professor at the University of Denver. He was really helpful in providing us with the issues that were associated with implementing the legalization of medical marijuana in state, because Colorado is actually a state that has legalized medical cannabis for recreational use and medically. So yeah, one of the things that he talked about with us was that in high school, 18-year-olds are able to administer medical cannabis because they have cards, and medical cannabis is a lot more potent than recreational cannabis. So that's kind of a problem, and we wanted to make sure that we address that in our bill.
So next we spoke with Dr. Fowler. He actually reached out to us when we sent him our survey about cannabis and asked us if we wanted to meet with him. He was very passionate about the subject. He's done a lot of research on it, not personally, but through other experts. And he talked a lot about the dangers of marijuana that don't get talked about a lot, like increased risk of stroke, psychosis in kids, and heart attack, and how if a pregnant woman were to use it, her child can be severely affected and have depression and have an IQ drop. And those are just some of the many negative side effects he talked about.
So next we have the survey, and the first thing that we did was prototype the survey. So we consulted our own Ms. Clark, and she was able to tell us how to make sure the survey was unbiased but also brief, because doctors are very busy and they need time to take the survey, but it can't be too long. So we made sure the survey was brief and we made sure it was unbiased, and we did the first couple of questions in the span of a week and sent it to be piloted.
Okay, so during our piloting stage of our survey, this is really directly related to the test and improve part of our EDP. During this time, we received feedback from Barry, Hackham, Miss Wilkins, and Dertra. We changed the wording of several questions as well as shortened the summary of the Senate bill. We also added some demographic questions.
So our final survey was split into 3 sections. The introduction, which included demographics. So we had a brief introduction about who we were and what we were trying to do, and then asked demographic questions like age, location, and political philosophy. And then the second section was about cannabis uses. So we asked if the doctors would prescribe it and what they would prescribe it for. And then lastly, we talked about legalization. So we provided a short summary of the NC Compassionate Care Act and asked them if they would pass the bill or not and why. And then to distribute it, we wanted to email doctors. So to find their emails, we went on a lot of the NC Medical School's websites and asked Ms. Holsey, the Health Science Academy director, and we ended up making a spreadsheet of about 200 doctors' emails and sent those out in 4 batches. Our email just talked about who we are and what we were doing, and then linked the survey.
Okay, so these are the results of our survey. So first up, we have demographics, which really puts our results into perspective. So our sample size was slightly leaning to the left, but we think this is mainly due to the large population coming from Wayne County. Our areas of practice with the most results were pediatrics, or one of the ones with the highest results were pediatrics, which could lead to a lower yield of cannabis prescribing. Okay, and then we have the question of should cannabis be legal? And overall, 78.2% said cannabis should be legal in some capacity. This is either medical or recreational. And then we also asked if they would prescribe or recommend cannabis in their own practice. And this result was a slightly lower, while there was some yeses, 39.1% said no. And then finally, we have a very straightforward question here of whether or not they would pass the bill, and 52.2% said yes, which is very split ticket.
Finally, we have the legislative letter itself. We consulted my aunt. Her name is Stacey Irwin, and she is an attorney in Philadelphia. She helped us with the format of the letter, the one-page, concise kind of standard, and she also told us to make sure that we introduced ourselves, gave an introduction to the project, and then had a 1 to 2 body paragraph explaining what we thought of the bill and what we wanted to make happen with the changes, and then we finally had a conclusion. Yeah.
So for our first draft, we just introduced ourselves, talked about our research, and then we basically said to pass the bill. We chose to side with passing the bill because we think that a lot of the benefits can outweigh the harms as long as it's very limited to a certain demographic of people and that it's controlled by the state. So next we talked to Camille Gourdet, who we were put in contact with through Lauren Dutra. They both work at RTI. Camille is a public health analyst, so she talked about all the different kinds of marijuana bills in the United States and how they vary a lot with how specific they are or how broad they are. And with our own NC bill, there's a very specific list of conditions that qualify. It's very strict and has a lot of penalties and restrictions on who can use it. And she said that instead of saying whether we should pass the bill or not, we should actually recommend changes to the senators. So some things she gave us ideas for were penalties and pushing for no inhalable products and the packaging and potency. And then she also gave us some tips on formatting our legislative letter. Oh, sorry. So for our second draft, what we changed was we talked more about what the bill specifically did and who it could help. And then the 3 recommendations we made were to find a way to test for cannabis in your system that isn't just positive or negative, but shows the potency in your system and comes back faster. And then child-proofing packaging, so kids don't have access to their parents or older siblings' medical marijuana. and then seed to sale trafficking so that it doesn't get laced with anything, it doesn't have contaminants in it, and it's overall safer to use.
Okay, during our revision stage, it's just like our piloting phase for our survey. We basically just got citations from Camille Gourdet, which made our letter more credible, and gave our senators an easy way to look at other states' legislative. Our final letter, this is just a copy of the whole thing. It's quite long, but it includes an intro. It addresses the problem that Senate Bill 711 is addressing, and then it gives a short summary of the bill as well as lists, in the next paragraph it lists out an explanation of our research that we did, and then finally we showed our support of the bill and then listed out our modifications that we would make with our citations.
And finally, we have our contacts and responses. We sent out the bill, the letter, and the survey linked in the letter with on May 21st, and we still haven't received responses, of course, because legislators are very busy. We sent it to the 21 members of the committee that were addressing the bill, and yeah. So finally, we have our final thoughts. We do not know whether the bill will be passed, but we do know a lot more about medical cannabis as a whole. It's a very controversial topic in the state of North Carolina and just the United States in general. So we are really happy that we were able to take a step and see what we can find out about this really controversial topic. So yeah.
Thank you for watching.